Hello and welcome to Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things relating to your well-being, including interviews with experts in the fields of nutrition, physical and mental health, and my 5-minute food facts series. I am Amanda Hayes, your host, a nutritionist with a passion for well-being. Before I introduce today's guest, I will take a moment to let you know that you can subscribe to my podcast on YouTube, hit the red subscribe button, or on your favourite podcast app, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. I will also mention that although I will often be speaking with experts, any information or advice provided on Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast is not intended to be used to treat, cure, or prevent injuries or medical conditions, and is not a substitute for advice from your own health professional. Today I am here with Dr. Scott Coussens. Scott has the great honour of being the first guest to appear twice on Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast. As you may recall from episode 11, Scott works at the University of South Australia in the School of Psychology, Social Work and Social Policy. He is an expert on sleep, and his area of specialty includes electroencephalography, more commonly known as EEG, sleep and child health, and the interrelationship between the latter two. Scott has published numerous papers on the topic in peer-reviewed journals. Another area of Scott's expertise is children and nature play, and that is the topic of our discussion today. To set the scene for this discussion, I just want to mention that child mental illness is increasing in Australia. Today, 1 in 7 children between the ages of 0 and 14 years experience mental illness, mainly depressive disorders, and the incidence increases in adolescence. One of the problems with this statistic is that childhood mental illness is a strong predictor of adult mental illness. So finding ways to combat mental illness in childhood is plainly important. In relation to mental health, resilience is significant because it is a preventative factor in ensuring mental well-being. Resilience is defined as a positive adaptation and increased ability to cope with stress and hardship. Factors that promote resilience in children include supportive parental attachments, good health, female gender, intelligence and social competence. So social competence is having strong connections with family, peers and community, being empathetic, caring, having good communication skills and being able to manage emotions. Some of the traditional mediators of resilience, in other words, things that can impact resilience, include family violence, divorce if there was conflict and or violence involved, poverty, male gender, and low social competence. Obviously, these would impact it in a negative way. So given that we can't always change children's circumstances or their home environments, scientists are looking beyond the traditional mediators to other factors that can influence resilience. And that is essentially the topic of today's discussion, how nature-based play and learning can positively influence resilience in children. Studies in Europe and the UK support this, but it is a relatively new concept in Australia. Forest schools in Sweden were developed in the 1950s. They describe themselves as an inspirational environment offering children opportunities to increase confidence through applied learning in nature. Hi Scott, and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, g'day. Thanks for having me back.
It's a pleasure. You're the first one to come on twice. So
really?
What does that say? Best guest?
I work close by.
So as I mentioned in the introduction, today we are talking about nature play and children and the impact that can have on resilience. Scott, I'd like to start with a general question. What are some of the positive impacts associated with being in nature for anyone, not just children?
Okay, so some of the, it pretty much covers everything, like the reported benefits. So general physical health, mental health, socialization, improved reported well-being, as well as sort of more objective measurements. So it really covers the whole suite of it. Pretty much anything you can think of regarding health has been reported to be benefited by spending time in nature, spending time in green settings, in natural settings, or not just nature, but less structured environments, or just being outdoors, just experiencing hot and cold and things like that. And so we get lots of reports, a lot of people very keen to promote it, and our research group's also interested in this, but we're trying to find the evidence behind it.
Yeah, I think it's something that people instinctively know, because you do feel better.
It seems very logical.
It does, but I guess it's also good to get the actual scientific evidence underpinning that as well.
Yes, a lot of things that are common sense, people remember, just simply aren't the case. And so, we need to check these things. And there's no doubt that there's some benefit, but some of this is the interest in it is driven by a sort of ideology and nostalgia and stuff. So our group tries to find, what's the real benefits, and what might be the mechanism, so that we can practically introduce this into the lives, because people aren't just going to en masse move outside and just abandon our houses, for health benefits, and it would create its own problems. So it's so we're trying to take the bits that show real promise.
And if we relate that to children, if we apply it to preschool age children, studies have shown that unstructured and creative play in nature allows children to develop social competence like teamwork skills and expressing emotions. What is unstructured creative play in nature?
Okay, so in a way, the unstructured creative play is an ideal state. It's like that you want the child to use their imagination to not be directed by an adult, to not be prescribed what they can do by the environment either. So like for example, a swing, it doesn't have what they call many affordances. You can swing back and forwards on it. You might sit on it slightly differently, but there's not much you can really of course, if you use your imagination, there's a lot of things you can do, but it structurally limits the child. Whereas, if they have, some sticks and a tree to climb and, like a river to play in or something, or maybe not a river, a creek to play in, their imagination can form more of the game.
Right.
But, of course, like I said, it's an idealized concept, and what the people always try and get is less interference. But there's always a trade-off. The less you input, the less directed the child is, and the more they use their imagination. But a small amount of input could drive them and just give them that little bit of direction that they need to make those conceptual leaps and things that would be helpful for learning. So everyone in the field seems to have a slightly different idea of what unstructured play is, but it's the basic concept is that it's not controlled by adults and technology. That's the sort of core. So
it sounds like it's really encouraging children to use their imaginations.
Absolutely. Yeah. But there is also a component of children interacting with other children.
Yeah, of course.
Not being told what to do by adults or by curriculums and by being restricted by things. Right.
And what are the positive impacts of that type of unstructured play?
Well, the use of imagination, it is thought that can lead to what's called it's not called resilience. It leads to resilience through the building of self-efficacy. So in psychology, you have this idea of that if you believe in yourself and you learn the skills within yourself, that you can make an impact on the world, that you can go out there and do something and you have an impact, you have a positive impact on your own life, that you will continue to do this and you learn these skills. And so the unstructured play gives the child the ability to believe in themselves and build resilience. And then at the same time, they're learning. If children are unstructuredly playing together, they're negotiating the outcome of that game. They're negotiating the game. They're learning these basic social skills. They're basically imitating society in a microcosm and learning how to get along with one another, learning how to continue playing. Because normally the true benefit of unstructured play is that kids want to keep doing it. They don't want to stop. Yeah. And if you don't want to stop, it means that you have to negotiate your way through this. This is why we want to keep adults out of it, because otherwise they're prescribing these things and jumping in and stopping. You might be hurt, or you might, or, don't pick on that kid. Whereas if you let them sort it out for themselves, to an extent, of course, there's another ideal situation which doesn't transcribe perfectly to reality, because you do need to step in at certain
Well, you don't
points.
want them to hurt themselves, I guess.
No, well, there's a well-known concept in this area, and you have a difference between learning injuries and catastrophic injuries, right? You don't want the catastrophic injuries. You want the learning injuries. You want someone falls down, they learn how to get back up.
Yeah, stub their toe or something like that.
Stub their toe, they learn how to go on. They scratch themselves on getting through a shrub. They learn to do things, go in backwards to protect your face, that sort of thing. You learn skills. And it's the same with the socializing. You learn skills, and this has been found to be a very good way of learning skills, is by doing. This is basically how our minds work, is you do it. Children do not learn by, as everyone with children knows, you say, don't do that thing. And I was just talking to my little one this morning about jumping on the couch, and I said, I tell you not to do it, but you keep doing it. And she's like, well, I like doing it.
It's logic.
So they don't learn just by being told.
No, of
they
course
need to learn by experience. If I let her jump on it and she fell off a few times, then she might learn not to do it in a particular way.
Yeah. I guess the other thing is learning, which is probably less important to children, but learning to protect your property, in that you don't want her to ruin the couch and you have to buy a new one. That would be irritating.
Well, we do have to buy a new one.
Or maybe that's why she's jumping all over it. She knows there's a new one coming.
That is true. We were talking about it. She goes, well, it doesn't matter. You're getting a new one anyway.
Smart girl. So that's really about preschool age children, the question I just asked. What about school age children? If it is known that playing in nature can have a positive impact on child's resilience, school seems a very obvious place to let that happen, because children spend a lot of time at school, obviously. So there are some schools that are introducing interaction with nature through nature-based learning. Can you tell us what nature-based learning involves?
Well, nature-based learning is you take the principles of some of it's unstructured play. Like a lot of these, they like to introduce something because they're finding so many benefits of that unstructured play. They just give them a heap of what's known in the field often as loose parts. You probably might, if you've been looking into this at all, you might have come across that. A lot of people, it's like, instead of having everything tied down and structurally in place, it's like let the kids have as many affordances as they can, as many opportunities to do something as they can. So that they'll give them just a sand pit, sticks, whatever, just let them play in nature, like literally. That's part of the school nature-based learning. And then another part is you still have to follow the curriculum.
Yes, of course.
To a certain extent. So you need maths. So what do? You do counting by twos or something as part of like a first year curriculum. You do counting by twos in nature. You find pairs of things and count them up and things like that. So you basically just transplanting a lot of that. And so that becomes, it's not ideal, but we have to live in reality. We have to still follow the curriculum. Yeah. And people need to learn these skills. And so that gives you an opportunity to get those added benefits of nature while still applying it. And some things are better applied out of the classroom. So imagine learning about the weather. You can see pictures of the weather, or you could just go and experience the weather.
Yeah, that's true.
Like you could see pictures of cloud types, or you could go and look at cloud types. So sometimes the nature part of it adds directly to the learning, and then sometimes it's just a bonus that you're outdoors, you're moving around, and you're still getting your maths learning. You do, and all that socializing again, but also negotiating risks, managing the risks. That's a big part of child development at that age.
Yes.
It's like working out what's risky, working out your own levels, and so that's a real bonus into the learning.
Yeah. Well, I read when I was doing some reading about the forest schools in Sweden, one of the ways they use nature is to learn the alphabet outside. So look for things shaped like, letter A, letter B, letter C, etc. So I thought that was quite an ingenious way.
Yeah, so that's
certainly more fun.
Some of the people see that as too prescriptive.
Okay.
As for a nature-based learning. But I think, again, you just, everyone has a slightly different idea, but as long as we're getting the kids outside, at least it's better than just sitting around. Yeah, and I know there's been research about boys in particular learning better when they're actually moving. Yes, there is. There's quite a bit of research and that, like in creativity, that people are more creative when moving than not. So if you wanted to have a creative meeting about a project you're doing, often you'll find there are certain academics that will walk while they're doing it. One of the professors, if you want to have a meeting, it's a walking meeting. He'll walk around with you, and it does work. You feel it. I don't know. It frees part of your mind that might otherwise be occupied. What are the main differences between a nature-based school and a regular school? Well, I mean, a lot of the schools now are bringing in a nature playground, so that the difference is actually starting to decrease slightly. But obviously, a standard curriculum, it's quite sedentary, quite technology based. It's very directed from the teacher. It's sort of a top-down model, directed from the teacher, and then the teacher's being directed by the education department. So it's very prescriptive. It's very top-down directed, whereas nature play in its sort of purest form is much more bottom-up. It's driven by the students. They will decide. That's one of the big differences I noticed with Upper Sturt Primary. Is the local
the bush school, isn't it?
Bush school that we have here, and we're doing some work with them in a research project. And what we find there is that the teachers tend to trust the students more, and they do have these. They still have to follow the curriculum, so they still have to. They need to learn to read certain markers, but what they'll do is allow the students collectively or individually at times to decide on how they're going to get there and negotiate that for themselves. And you can see that that's an additional skill that the other students aren't learning, because if you have to decide what you're doing, how to reach a goal, rather than being told you will reach that goal and this is how we're doing it and now do it, that's a very different skill. It's more passive, isn't it? Yeah. That traditional way. You still learn, and I mean, that's the way I learned, was, very rote learning. Yeah. I was probably at the end of that tradition. Although that might be the case for people our age, but we also had a lot of unstructured play in our daily lives. Outside school was unstructured. Yeah, exactly. Play in we the just disappeared and went off to the local creek and caught tadpoles and. I grew up in Wyler. There was no local creek, local desert. Local desert. Yeah, I just remember being out all day in the local parks and whatnot. I actually can't imagine allowing, even though I'm involved in this work, I cannot imagine letting my child be as free range as I was at that age. Like walking all day in the bush, to quarries, to... Yeah, amazing. And no phone to say, oh, Mum, I'm at the quarry, I'll be back at 2. Showing my age, but they didn't exist. No, same. Yeah.
I know, it's very different. So we got sort of, I guess, both aspects. We got the rote learning side of school, but we also balanced it a bit with the nature play ourselves. Yes. In your department at the University of South Australia, you have a girl, Jara Seeger, who's doing she's done her honours thesis. Is that right?
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Last year.
And that was about comparing resilience outcomes of children from a nature-based curriculum versus a standard curriculum. And the results were, in a very general sense, that children attending a nature-based school had greater resilience than their classroom-educated peers. So can you tell us a little bit about her study and the findings?
Yeah, so it was mostly a survey-based study. So we basically just got the parents and the teachers to report on things like behaviour and internalising behaviours, like whether anxious or depressed, those sorts of things, as well as their, markers of resilience and their social skills. And then we got a mock report card to see how their academic performance was, and then measured their exposure to nature play by having a variety of scores, but mainly Upper Sturt was the sort of index group of people exposed to a nature-based curriculum, and then the other schools either had none or some small amount.
Control?
They were basically a control, but a variable control, but it seemed that the nature-based schools still showed the difference. And the idea was, we were exploring the idea of the socialization aspect of the nature-based play, because that was one of the more well-known mechanisms by which it was thought to work, that you cooperate together, as I was explaining before, the negotiating
and the problem solving.
But that didn't actually come out as the reason, but they still showed greater resilience, which is why we've come back this year to rerun it again.
Oh, interesting.
And we're running it currently now with a new honours student, Angela, and she is looking at more of the internalising behaviours, if the mechanism is more through whether they get that self-efficacy, whether they're the self-mastery. If you're confident in yourself, you learn the skills of controlling yourself and your internal state, how you feel about yourself.
So that's not innate then, is it? That self-efficacy, it's something it's learned.
It is part of our maturation. It's part of development. It's just that it can be stifled, with too much direction. You can stifle self-efficacy. A person doesn't, and I think people that are involved in education, they can see this, that you can see people now, they're very smart children, but they don't have a lot of initiative for their own thing. They look to be told what to do, whereas...
Because that's what they've learned.
Yeah, these children might have a greater self-efficacy, might be more self-starting and more confident in themselves. But those results are yet to be shown. No. There's actually not quite as much research, good quality research that's been done in this area, unfortunately, because it's a very interesting area, and it would be great to have more precise answers.
And I guess also to make changes in the education system, you do need the research backing it up.
Absolutely. That is going to be, I think, the next step, and that's why we're getting involved at this level, is because there's a lot of people interested in it. There's a lot of goodwill. Yeah. But unless you have hard evidence and you can draw research funding and that, then like this, it sort of supports itself. And until you can get decent evidence, you won't get the research funding to do really good studies, and then you won't convince government departments until you can get that really good evidence from the really good studies, but they're expensive to do.
Of course. They're not going to change the curriculum on a warm, fuzzy idea, are they?
No, and nature-based play suffers from an image problem as well. Yeah. From outside of the people that are within the field, they love it. They're very passionate. But outside, a lot of people look at it and say, I don't want my kid just playing in the mud. I'd rather them learning violin or something. What good does playing in the mud do? Playing in the mud amazingly beneficial.
Yeah.
But we need to show that with hard scientific facts. And a lot of the studies have been small, underpowered,
Yeah.
or observational only. We need intervention studies. We need so the idea of these studies within our research group that we've been talking about is to get some pilot data to push for an intervention study where we actually make a change, measure the change.
So these are the building blocks, I guess, for the next level of studies.
Exactly.
Yeah. And do you think nature play or nature-based learning is beneficial because it takes kids away from other sources of stress, like social media, or are the benefits independent of that?
Well, I think
both.
It's both.
Yeah.
But we don't know the mechanisms. Now, there are a lot of proposed mechanisms and a lot of bits of evidence pointing in different directions. So one might be that it's fitness, that you're just moving around more, you're more physically active, that's good for you, and there are all the benefits that we know flow from that.
Yes.
It could be that reduction in stress, the removal from the pressures of keeping up on social media and things like that. It could be that. It could be the green effect. Basically, if you just show people pictures of a mountain or something, they are less stressed. They don't even need to go and be in nature. They just need to be reminded of nature to feel less stressed. There was a study where they got adults to climb a tree, and people in a tree are less stressed than people that aren't in a tree.
I was a huge tree climber as a child.
Me too.
Loved it.
Yeah. And but for obvious reasons, I don't climb a lot of trees now.
I
and
can't lift my legs up high enough.
But yeah, so there are lots of potential mechanisms here, but we don't really know, and that's part of exploring these these projects and looking at what might be a good mechanism to explain what's going on, and then that would direct, if it's not the socialization part, but it's really just getting people into nature, we can do that. That's an intervention we can do. We can just organize someone and we bust the kids out and let them run around in a nature park or something.
The other benefits might be it might improve immunity and things like that, but I guess that's a different side of it. But
there is, I think it all contributes, and that is another aspect to it, is that we think that we want to protect children and that'll make them healthier, but actually small insults to your body, controlled insults, it's the learning injuries rather than the catastrophic injuries that build strength, and that goes across physiology. So, and from exercise, it's not that it's fun necessarily. You sort of learn to love the pain, but it's not that it's fun. It's that it's doing you slight damage, controlled damage, and your body responds to that by getting stronger, and that's you improving your fitness. But that works across everything. If you don't get any insults to your body, you don't build strength.
Or your immune system.
And the immune system is exactly the same. So you need to get your hands in the mud. And there's so much now about over-sterilizing the home environment and children not being exposed to these pathogens and things. And then and the allergy rates are going through the roof.
Because that's the other thing that I'm fascinated by is because the allergy rates are going through the roof. I didn't know anyone when I was a child that had any kind of allergy.
It was rare.
So it obviously hasn't been a genetic change. It's been something we've done in our environment. And what exactly is that? And there are theories. The over-sterilization theory is one.
Well, to me it makes sense because from a physiology background, that's my undergraduate background, you need small amounts of physical damage. You need to put yourself at risk, and this is mentally, physically, not catastrophic risk, but enough to push you to grow. And so we see that, and that's a very likely mechanism for the benefits from my perspective. But of course, we need to prove that or at least demonstrate it more substantially.
Childhood has changed a lot, I think, in the last several decades. And one of the things I wonder about is we do we do expose our children to nature, but sometimes it's in a very structured way rather than an unstructured way. And that could be they're playing sport on a, grassy oval or whatever, surrounded by trees. Do you think that we overstructure our children these days?
Oh, it does appear so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess everyone's different. But
I have a 26-year-old child and a 19-year-old and a 6-year-old. So I have sort of lived through the various changes, and that is one of the things that I've noticed. My first one, she's a bit of a tomboy, if that's an allowable term. And she was allowed to play more on her own with other children out in the street, that sort of thing. And then the middle one was less so, and now our latest one, she, we've sort of been hovering a fair bit, and but we're trying to move back from that because of coming into this field over the last few years and trying to learn from what's happening. But it's hard to break, even when you know what's beneficial. It's hard to break those habits, and it's hard to weigh up the risks and benefits when it's your own child. It's easy for me to say we need to allow children to be more risky, but I often won't let Maddie go out the front on her own, and I've got to absorb my own lessons.
You're right though. It is hard when it comes to your own children. I mean, it's the same with, in my case, nutrition. Sometimes they eat things I know they shouldn't eat, but we can't be perfect.
Exactly.
And so we have mentioned briefly in South Australia, the Upper Sturt Primary School is the first bush school. So that's great. I wonder if there are any others that you know of around Australia?
There are across Australia. I can't remember their names.
No, that's fine. So there are some.
Yes, there's a few, and they're not all the same. Some of them, like I was saying before, they'll introduce a nature component, or like Upper Sturt is pure. It's very dedicated to the ideal. But there are others that are still in an urban environment, but try and use a nature when they can, nature-based curriculum when they can. But it isn't where they're situated. So you get a whole range, and which is very helpful from a research point of view, because we can look at the degree of exposure and then what happens with the children.
And so what are, apart from the need to have solid scientific evidence, what do you think are some of the other barriers for establishing more of the forest or bush style schools?
Well, one is access to nature.
Yeah.
I mean, we, pretty readily chop everything down that we can. And the vast majority of children live in urban environments. And so we don't have the ease of access to nature. But I mean, compared to some other places in the world, we have very good access.
Compared with Hong Kong, for example.
Yeah. I mean, Adelaide, you drive for 20 minutes and you're in bushland. It's not untouched by any means, but it is much more on the nature side than, Rundle Mall. And we have access, but it's that sort of difficulty of finding good environments. But also, like I said, there's an image problem.
Yeah.
And we don't see the benefits necessarily. And people worry that if they allow their children to just unstructured play instead of directing them to, like I said, learn some skill or, they will fall behind. And it's possible in some respects that they will fall behind in those skills, but then they may learn other more useful skills. And that's what we're trying to find, if that's true, and if it's if you can do an intervention and that change sticks.
And it's harder to measure those other skills in a way, isn't it? Like self-efficacy and things like that.
It's becoming less so because the rates of especially teenage anxiety and depression is huge in Australia. And growing all the time, just skyrocketing really. And we need to do something about that. And this is something that's shown that it can potentially impact in a beneficial way.
Yeah.
And so we need to take that fairly seriously, I think.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily seen so easily in marks, but if you think of well-being in general, then it's really, it is a measurable and noticeable impact.
With my final question I usually ask, Scott's already answered that on episode 11. So I have another question for you. What's your next physical challenge? Given this is an Ironman I'm talking to here.
Okay, so the plan is that I'm going to do the 6-day event coming up around Thornton Park.
Oh, what's that? So...
You basically just run in a small circle for 6 days.
That sounds horrific.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge.
Yeah. So, no, you must sleep, surely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can't be awake for 6 hours,
no,
6 days. Yeah.
No. You camp there. I mean, the very dedicated runners might only sleep a few hours a night and just run hundreds and hundreds of kilometres over the time. But I'm less dedicated and will sleep as much as I need, and have to go off at times, no doubt, to do things like pick my kid up from school or go to the...
Oh, so you can come and go from this event.
But, I mean, I think it's a bit frowned upon that you shouldn't really... You're allowed to, but it's not the purest intention to do that.
Still pretty amazing. 6 days.
Well, I've done the 24-hour one.
Yeah.
And normally... I think you probably should go like a 48-hour one, but I just thought I'll go the next step.
That seems to be your approach, doesn't it? Like, don't go halfway. Just do the full thing.
Yeah, I mean, why not?
Yeah, well, that sounds amazing.
But I mean, we'll see. I might chicken out just before and cut my time down.
When is that?
It's in early October.
Early October. Wow. Oh, well, good luck with that, Scott, and thank you for coming on today.
That's been my pleasure.
And that was Dr. Scott Coussens, neuroscientist, sleep expert, and nature play expert. You can subscribe to Amanda's Wellbeing podcast on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, and while you're there, click on the bell to be alerted when new episodes are available. You can also subscribe on your favourite podcast app, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, and you can follow the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Direct links to all social media can be found on the subscribe page of my website at www.amandaswellbeingpodcast.com. If you would like to contact me, you can send me a message via the contacts page on my website. Please feel free to suggest topics you'd like to learn more about and people you'd like to hear interviewed, and I'll do my best to deliver that to you. Producing the podcast is a labour of love. We put a lot of time, money and effort in behind the scenes. So if you enjoy Amanda's Wellbeing podcast and would like to make a contribution via Patreon, PayPal or by Amazon to help ensure we continue to provide you with excellent content, please visit the contribute page on my website. Finally, please take a minute to leave a rating on iTunes. It improves visibility and will help me source excellent guests. Thank you for tuning in. Eat well, move well, think well.